So welcome back to Tenza Motorsports. Today I have my cousin David. We are going to be answering some questions that I thought were more appropriate to have like a legit response to. I know sometimes it gets kind of confusing over replies and text messages and stuff like that to have somebody ask a question and then us try to answer it without, replying with this massive paragraph that can tend to be kind of boring to read or get kind of confusing if we did a typo or said something wrong, or we get autocorrect and then you guys don't actually understand what we're saying. So before we start our little question and answer section here, I'm actually going to have David go over his credentials again. We did this a while back when we first started our M54 engine rebuild because I thought it was important for people to know that David actually does know what he's doing. So I'm going to have him run through that real fast again, and then we'll go on to some of these questions people have had.
So starting out in high school, my first job was at a Subaru Mechanics, and we did everything from tires to engine swaps and rebuilds, and that was when I was 16. So I worked on cars for a long period of time, and then I finally decided to go get an actual degree, and I got a mechanical engineering degree with an automotive emphasis. Brigham Young University of Idaho. It was a 4-year bachelor's of science. All the SAE certification classes had to be taken for that automotive emphasis. So I'm a mechanical engineer focused on automotive, and I've worked in the automotive industry for most of my life in some form or another.
So now that we've got that out of the way and that we know David knows more than me, we'll do our best to answer some of these questions and hopefully give some more insight on some of these pressing issues that people have been having. Well, besides the typos, I think this one's more of a hate comment.
Yeah, probably.
But this one is one, so this guy is pretty derogatory and kind of jabby with his question here, but it basically says, yeah, really smart. Know that grit and crud has gone through your bearings, through your oil filter, through your oil pump, and into the bottom of your oil pan as sludge collection of oil and settles to the bottom of the pan at night. Good new motors, bad for old motors.
I think that's what he means.
Yeah, so he's saying it's good for new motors, bad for old motors.
Yeah, his phone auto-corrected him hardcore. So with that, yes, if you've got dirt in your oil, it's going to flow around the motor. But there's some really interesting things about how engines work. First of all, the oil is picked up by a screen that prevents large chunks to go into the oil pump. The oil pump itself is designed with tolerance so that small particles don't damage the oil pump. Next thing that happens, it goes into the oil filter. And the oil filter is specifically designed to remove grit and crud from your oil. That's why it exists. And depending on what filter you get, even if you get the crappiest like $3.50 filter that you can get at AutoZone or O'Reilly's or wherever, it's still got a rating of about 50 microns. Now, just to kind of put that in scale, a micron is a 10,000th of an inch. Okay, tiny, tiny particles. So 50 microns is very, very small. This clearance between your bearings and your crank, your bearings and your camshaft bearings, they're around the 100 micron range, and that space is filled up by pressurized oil. So the oil comes out of the filter with tiny particles left in it. Okay, it comes into that space under pressure, and it fills the space between the bearing and the crank surface. That highly pressurized oil then leaves the bearing surfaces. It goes in, it pressurizes, and it comes out under pressure. So any crud or gunk that's falling off the outside of the engine, if it falls down and tries to enter that bearing surface just falling, it's going to be pushed out immediately by the oil that's coming from the filter and pushing out through that bearing surface. So crud cannot fall into a bearing surface. It has to go through the filter first, and the filter takes out particles that are large enough to cause damage to those bearings. If you use a high quality filter, like the wicks that I prefer, they're 8 micron filters, which means anything bigger than 8 microns gets stuck in the filter. Doesn't go into your engine or the components of your engine that require lubrication. Now there is one exception to this, which is the camshafts on double overhead cam engines, which the BMW is. And those cam lobes are spinning around exposed and running on the surface that pushes the valve down. Now grit can get on that surface and then go around and be brought into interface with that cam lobe and with the lifter. Here's the thing, if you have proper oil, which is not broken down, the surface tension of that oil, as those two surfaces scrape across each other, the grit gets caught and pushed out as that rolling action happens, because that's what oil does. We could get into even more detail about boundary layers and fluid dynamics, but the point of the matter is a proper oil sticks to the metal and pushes the grit off. So yes, eventually if your oil breaks down, those particles will start to do damage. But if your oil is fresh, your filter is good, you don't have anything to worry about.
So this next question, again, same video. This is my Royal Purple Part 1 video. And he's basically saying the same thing. All that crap goes through your engine, gets pushed through your filter pump, and it's going to go into the rest of your engine. This is actually a pretty common question. That's why I spent so much time having David answer it, is so that we don't have to go over it again. And there were a lot of people asking this. So this next question is on my Royal Purple Part 3 video. Do you think the Royal Purple caused that loose nut by taking away deposits that were holding it tight after wear and tear? So he's referring to my oil pump nut. That's the little reverse thread sprocket that is that's on the oil pump. It's a chain-driven oil pump, and basically what happens on these 3 series, especially the 330, is that nut will back itself off. You lose your sprocket and you lose all your oil pressure. On mine, when I opened it up after about 175,000 miles, that nut was loose. And so honestly, I have no idea if Royal Purple was the cause of that. I don't think that Royal Purple would have dug up underneath in between the threads to. I'm not sure if BMW. I think they're just torqued. I don't think BMW puts any thread locker on them. So I honestly don't think that Royal Purple was the cause of that.
There's no way to really tell if they have a history of coming loose. I'm imagining that not everybody that had them come loose put Royal Purple in right before it happened.
Right. Right.
If there was some buildup there holding it in place, the Royal Purple could have dissolved that. But again, if it's a known issue, I highly doubt that Royal Purple is responsible. There's too many variables there to tell if that was a thing.
So if you have a 330 CI, dropping your oil pan, doing an oil pan gasket, and replacing that nut with a $10 or $15 wired nut, or putting a tack weld on it, is definitely worth not having to replace the engine. So this is another one that kind of goes along with the oil filter question that we had earlier. This one is a little bit different question, and I think it's important again that we go over this one. Do you think an oil filter can hold the debris and sludge that falls off your engine if someone uses this oil for the first time on their vehicle? Or do you think it might get filled up pretty quick?
Relative to a normal oil change, yeah, it's going to get filled up pretty quick.
So based on the engine that we got from eBay, which was a big thing, I guess, too. A lot of people were like, oh, you bought an eBay engine? Hey, by the way, eBay doesn't make or sell used motors. A salvage yard posted on eBay, and that's where I bought it from. If I wouldn't have used eBay, I probably wouldn't have found the engine. That engine was extremely dirty. So if we would have used Royal Purple
on that engine
as it was,
dude, I just set a filter every 500 miles and an oil change every 500 because it'd have been turning black, completely solid black in that time frame.
So to answer the question, on a really dirty engine, your oil filter would definitely not last as long as what the oil is expected to. But that's one of the reasons why I was doing some of these other my Part 2 Royal Purple and my Part 4 Royal Purple, was to see at what point you should be changing your oil and your filter. So what happens if you do this and it starts coming off and you just ignore it? What's going to happen to your oil filter if it gets plugged?
The oil filter is going to get plugged. And by plugged, it means that, again, we're talking about the fact that it catches anything above a certain micron level, whatever that micron rating is. And as those areas to catch that get filled up, the oil pump can produce ridiculous amounts of pressure, 80 psi and above. The reason that your oil pressure stays at about 60 for most vehicles is because that's the pressure at which it escapes the bearings. But the oil pump itself can push way harder than that. So what happens is that filter is just a paper material or a fiber material, depending on the brand, with a metal screen holding it in place. And as it gets clogged, it will start to receive more and more and more pressure, and it will literally collapse and rip. And then all of that gunk that was on the area where it ripped and any that's still in the oil will then start going into your bearings. And the other commenter that was saying, oh, that gunk and crud is going to go through your bearings, that will happen if you blow a filter out. And then it will destroy your engine really quickly. So if you do have a really dirty engine and you start using a detergent oil, you're going to need to change those filters often until the oil starts staying clean for more than 500 miles. And you'd probably be good about 500 if it was super, super dirty. But you have to keep an eye on it. You can't just do this and forget it.
So this person commented in my Royal Purple Part 1, and he said that he tried Royal Purple in his Lamborghini kit car, which is pretty cool. I want a Lamborghini kit car.
That is cool. Yeah.
The oil is very thin. The engine started tapping. Noise also started. Smoking during startup. I will never run Royal Purple again. Mobil 1 full synthetic for me.
So it happened to him.
My thing is, I've been having a lot of people tell me that Royal Purple is really thin and Royal Purple is really thick. And based on other people on YouTube that have tested it, it lost the viscosity. It didn't flow as fast as another oil.
Which means it's too thick.
Which means it's too thick. So is it thick when it's cold and thin when it's warm? How would an oil do that? Is that even possible?
Synthetic oils especially are engineered to do interesting things. So you got your 5W30 or your 10W30 or your 5W20. 5 weight is the basic oil weight. It's its basic viscosity. The dash number is the viscosity that it becomes after it gets heated. So your 5 is its cold viscosity. Your 20 is its warm viscosity because they change. And the whole point is they can tailor the change in viscosity as it heats up and cools down. Now the perfect oil, if there was a perfect oil out there, the ideal theoretical viscosity oil would never change viscosity over its temperature range. It would just always be the same. Physics doesn't allow that. But what the companies have done is they've tried to get these oils to be thick and provide protection on startup, and then thin out and provide the flow necessary for high RPM running when it's warm. Again, we don't have a lot to go off with this Lamborghini kit car. If you had an old engine that used to have tight tolerance and you used a Royal Purple that was not set up for that engine, because again, Royal Purple on their website makes you put in what vehicle you're using before they recommend an oil to you. If you use the wrong oil, yes, it could damage his engine. That's the case with any oil. If you use the wrong one, it'll mess up your motor. Viscosities are a thing. Follow your manufacturer recommendation because you can cause problems if you use the wrong viscosity.
3 of the mechanics I've spoken to on this topic all independently said, never use flushing oils or detergent oils. Flushes out crap into the guts of your engine. Just change your oil regularly. Now we've gone over this. When it flushes out that crap into your engine, it goes through your filter. It's broken down. The big chunks, I didn't ever see any, but I guess the big chunks would never get out of your oil pan if you actually had a big chunk.
Yeah, they drop into the bottom of the pan.
But the last sentence of this is what I want to go over, and it says, just change your oil regularly.
Yes, agree, 100%.
Absolutely. So you want to change your oil regularly, but I wasn't in control of the engines before we bought these. Yeah. Before we bought these units. The one that I got from eBay, I have no idea what the heck was going on with that one. And the one that was in my car wasn't treated very well, at least the last 5 or 6 years before I owned it. In fact, mine was actually used as a drug car, and I had bought it out of an impound lot. So the previous owner didn't take care of it very well. The engine that was in my race car before it had gotten damaged and had to be pulled out, it looked very similar to that other one. I think the one from eBay was probably worse, but they looked very similar. They were both dark and dingy, and it just didn't, and I didn't think much of it because I'd never seen a clean engine. I just started working on cars. This was about 5-6 years ago. And I was replacing the oil once a year. The first year I had that car was a daily driver, so I drove about 6,000 to 7,000 miles. And then after that is when I really started to pull it apart, and it really became kind of unsuitable to drive back and forth to work. There's no AC, and it slowly became my track build. And at that point, I was replacing the oil once a year, about 3,500 miles once a year. So it did that for about 5 years, and nothing ever really changed. And then I put the Royal Purple in it, and that's when I saw the change. And when I pulled the valves off, or when I pulled the valve cover off to pull the engine out and everything like that, why did I pull the valve cover off? We dropped the other valve cover and broke it.
That's right.
And that's why I had to steal the one off of my car. And if we wouldn't have had to have done that, I don't know if I would have ever really seen that. Yeah, I probably would have never made the video. And I popped the valve cover off, and it's just... It was
like glowing gold.
I know, it really was. And it was really hard to get on camera. That's one of the reasons why I was using a flashlight, because it was so intense in person, and you'd put a camera on it, and then it was like... it doled it out. I was like, no, I want people to see how amazing this looks. But yes, change your oil regularly. Follow your manufacturer's recommendation. If you have a dirty engine, you definitely want to try to get that cleaned out in the best way possible. You want to check your oil filter, use an oil with a high detergent in it if you want to clean it out. If you don't want to,
If you don't want to, you can leave it. I don't want to say you won't see a difference, because you would if you cleaned it out. So if you get a car that's dirty, you just want to keep changing the oil and run it that way, that is up to you. You will see a performance increase, but there are a lot of people out there that say if you use a detergent oil, you'll start leaking. It's true, it's possible. But it's only possible because the person before you neglected maintenance. Because the only time you get a leak that then stops is because you've got a leak that they ignored long enough for dirt to fill and block.
So if you've got a gasket that's leaking, that gasket needs to be replaced. Yeah, the oil might have shown you that gasket, but if it was crunchy and old enough that it was falling apart and leaking, it's time to replace it anyways. So do your preventive maintenance, change your oil regularly, you should be just fine.
So this one, I just answered this one already, and this one said, my thoughts are do not switch this to an engine with over 100,000 miles. It will clean the engine out, but when it does, the engine's going to start smoking and using oil. In that old gunk, there is sealing up where you would be having leaks. I bought a really old Chevrolet that ran good, had no problems with it, pulled the valve covers out, and it just looked horrible, really, really bad. I couldn't even see how it was running. Put in a really good oil and it cleaned it out, and the engine started using so much oil you couldn't stand behind it. It was smoking so bad. Before I put the good detergent oil in it, it didn't smoke at all. This goes back to the fact, no, he specified Chevy, and I know these well. What he found out is that the valve guides were worn out, and the gunk was clogging them back up again. Because he said he pulled the valve covers, he couldn't see how it was running because the gunk was clogging the valve guides. As soon as he cleaned that out, oil was going past the valve guides and it was burning oil. That's what Chevys do when they're worn out. But again, there wouldn't be gunk and there wouldn't be worn valve guides if the person prior to him had taken good quality care of the engine, changed the oil, changed the filter regularly. It wouldn't have this problem. That is a thing. That will happen. But if you keep up on your maintenance beforehand, you won't have that problem. So if you do buy an old engine that's all gunky, you've got somebody who's worn it out, you have the choice of leaving it be and having it the way it is with poor performance, or cleaning it and having to replace a bunch of valves and gaskets.
So that reaches the end. I wanted to make sure that we went over those in more detail so we weren't just replying back these little dumb comments back from us, saying something that most people might not even understand. If we do typos too, we try our best to be grammatically correct when we're replying back on our channel. But we appreciate everybody for watching. Appreciate having David here with us to answer these questions so that I'm not sitting here just guessing. I kind of knew some of this stuff, but this has definitely reinforced my knowledge of some of the things that I was kind of guessing towards. With people to ask, I'd kind of go, well, I'm pretty sure that this is the way it sits. So this whole royal purple thing, honestly, guys, it's really just preference. If your car's running good and it's clean, just keep doing what you're doing. If you've got a dirty engine, you want to clean it up, just look into a high detergent oil. I've been using royal purple because supposedly it's a race oil. It's supposed to be for more of a performance car, and that's what my car does. Does that mean that it's perfect for your Toyota Camry? I mean,
are you racing your Toyota Camry?
Are you racing your Toyota Camry? I mean, you can still use it. It's not going to hurt your car as long as everything's been taken care of properly. So anyways, appreciate everybody for watching. We'll see you guys next time.